Hell is a deep and dark forest. The ground there is cold, trees stand bare amidst the shifting shadows. The hunter appears, please send someone else to take my place. My Uncle Teddy once gave me an old-world fairy tale book when I was a child. It was filled with gruesome, bloody stories, very different from the modern versions you see today. But at the end of the book was a poem, unlike anything else. And it was that poem that haunted me, sending shivers down my spine even as an adult. I remembered that poem as I sat at his memorial service 3 weeks ago, watching strangers mill around the coffin and the wreaths. My eyes stopped at the photo display, with pictures of Uncle Teddy from childhood until his mid-50s, when he passed away. They reminded me that I didn't really know him well. He only visited a few times when I was 8 or 9, and although I knew he regularly called to check on my father, my main impression of him was just the snippets of stories my dad told about his childhood and that old fairy tale book. I tried to suppress a shudder. Was that poem part of the book, or was it handwritten and added? I couldn't remember clearly. And what a man he was, wasn't he, Dee? A voice startled me out of my thoughts. I looked up to see 2 old women, hunched over with solemn faces, standing just a few feet from me. They reminded me of 2 ancient vultures eagerly enjoying a good meal, except perhaps these old women at a funeral were savoring grief instead of rotten meat. Chastising myself for the unpleasant thought, I forced a smile as I realized they were looking at me. "Oh yes, a truly extraordinary talent, Cordelia," the other woman, Millie, continued, her eyes never leaving my face. I swallowed hard. I knew they weren't going anywhere, so I decided to make conversation, hoping to escape soon. "So, you 2 knew my Uncle Teddy well." Millie chuckled, a raspy, gravelly sound that made me think of cigarettes and bourbon, perhaps indulged in heavily in her youth. "Oh yes, quite well. We were his clients for many years." That piece of information piqued my interest slightly. Clients? I've actually always been curious what Uncle Teddy did for a living. I heard he had a lot of money, but I never knew where it came from. Could you tell me what he worked as? The 2 women exchanged a glance, then burst into a fit of giggles. Their laughter was short, unpleasant, like 2 schoolgirls sharing a secret about a cat they just set on fire. I instinctively recoiled a bit, about to make an excuse to leave, when Dee spoke again. "He was an artisan, dear, talented to the point of pain. What we used his artistry for was those memorial dolls. We ordered one every year." Her voice sounded proud, or perhaps boastful, but I had no idea what she was talking about. Millie, however, looked annoyed. Her mouth drooped. "Not everyone inherits their entire fortune from their father and husband like you did. Besides, Theodore always said that once every 5 years was enough." Dee sniffed, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raising slightly. "Well, time will tell. I prefer to limit my time in the forest as much as possible, as often as possible." I was stunned. "Forest? What forest are you 2 talking about?" They exchanged another look before Millie offered a vague smile. "Oh, nothing for a nice girl like you to worry about, I'm sure." She leaned forward and lightly touched my arm, sending goosebumps all over me. I recoiled. "We just wanted to stop by and tell you that your uncle was an extraordinary man. It was lovely to meet you." Then they disappeared into the crowd. He was asterisk, not he had been. They kept saying he was instead of he had been. It could just be a slight error, but with those 2, nothing seemed accidental. I looked around, suddenly realizing it wasn't just those 2 who gave me the creeps. Most of the mourners were elderly, well-dressed, but what worried me was that almost everyone seemed to know each other, and they kept looking at me. At first, I didn't notice, but now it was clear they were exchanging discreet glances, quick looks, as if they all understood a joke I'd never been told. I wanted to pay my respects to my uncle, and I was the only family member there to do so, but enough was enough. I left the funeral home and got into my rental car. It was too late to fly home that night, but I planned to leave the next morning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. At first, I thought it was my alarm, but it turned out to be a call. I almost didn't answer, as it was an unknown number, but eventually I picked up. It was the slow, southern drawl of an older man. He introduced himself as Herschel Myers, my uncle's lawyer. He needed to meet me before I left town to discuss my uncle's estate. On my way to the lawyer's office, I was quite excited. thinking I might be about to inherit a large, unexpected sum from my rich but rarely seen uncle. I didn't know him well enough to feel guilty about not grieving too much, and I desperately needed money. However, sitting across from Mr. Myers, I gradually felt uneasy. It sounds silly, but he gave me a similar feeling to the two strange old women at the funeral the day before. He chatted with a forced cheerfulness, his cheeks flushed, resting on a jowly double chin that quivered like a piece of meat hanging in a butcher shop window. He prattled on about how wonderful my Uncle Teddy was again, was not had been, and how he'd considered him a close friend for decades, blah blah. Come on, you weirdo. Just get to the money so I can shower and get this over with. Then he got to the money, with a condition. If I did exactly as instructed, I would receive a $500,000 inheritance check, tax-free. I asked what I needed to do and how quickly it could be done. Mr. Myers chuckled. I like the way you talk, young lady. You remind me of Theodore quite a bit. Here's the deal. He stood up, walked to a large table against the wall, and picked up a polished wooden box, bringing it back and placing it in front of me. The wood was dark gray with swirling grain patterns, and a large silver lock was on the front. Mr. Myers handed me a small envelope, which seemed to contain a heavy key. Here's how it works. Inside this envelope is a key to open the box, a key to your uncle's house, and instructions. Tonight, at exactly 9:00 p.m., you go to his house and follow those instructions precisely. Not a minute sooner, not a minute later. Tomorrow morning, you come back here, and you'll receive a $500,000 check. How does that sound? I smiled, my hands slightly sweaty as I held the envelope. Sounds great. Inside the box was a letter in Uncle Teddy's handwriting. Dear Cordelia *. You don't know me well, but I hope you can help me with this, as you're the only one I can ask. I know this is strange, but please do it as precisely as possible. Tonight, go to my house. In the main hall to the right, there's a door leading to a large room with marble-tiled floors. In the corner of the room, there's a small table. On it, you'll find 12 branches, a bottle of gasoline, a small lighter, a knife, and a box of matches. Arrange 2 branches parallel to each other in each of the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. You can orient yourself using the fireplace in the room, as it is precisely north. Then, place the remaining 4 branches in between those 4 pairs, so that each branch connects 2 cardinal pairs. Place the doll you find in this box in the center of the branches. Use the knife to prick your finger and let 1 or 2 drops of blood fall onto the doll's face. Pour gasoline over the doll and the branches, then use a match to light them. Once the fire ignites, leave the house immediately and return to Mr. Myers' office tomorrow morning to collect your reward. Thank you for helping me, Cordelia. I wish we had been closer. Perhaps someday. The box also contained a doll unlike anything I had ever seen. It resembled Uncle Teddy to an astonishing degree. Its face was carved from what looked like ivory, and its body was made of a strange gray wood, similar to the outside of the box. In the center of the doll's chest was a small, smoke-colored glass compartment about the size of a coin. I couldn't see any way to open the glass, but inside there was a tuft of black, fur-like hair. This was the 10th time since opening the box that I wondered if I should just leave. My uncle's house was beautiful. The room where I was supposed to burn the doll was truly magnificent, but the thought of performing this bizarre ritual with the creepy doll sent alarm bells ringing through my entire body. I arrived early, checked around, made sure no one was there, and saw no surveillance cameras. How would the lawyer know if I actually did the ritual? But dared I gamble $500,000? I wasn't particularly superstitious. Assuming my rich uncle was just a bit eccentric, if his last wish was to burn that weird doll, what harm could it do? Damn it, it's 8:58. I was going to be late. Arranging the branches was easy, but getting the blood was harder. I was a bit squeamish about cutting myself. Still, I finally did it. The knife was sharp, so 1 quick prick on my finger was enough to draw blood. I pressed my finger against the doll's face. The doll's face felt slightly soft under the pressure, like a thin rubber surface, not carved ivory. I pulled my finger back, seeing a streak of blood on the pale ivory. But then it vanished. The blood seemed to be absorbed into the doll, and it felt as though the doll had gained several pounds. I fumbled, grabbing it with my bloody hand, finally placing it neatly among the branches. Then gasoline, then fire. The doll began to burn. I should have left. The instructions told me to leave immediately after lighting it, but I didn't. At first, I told myself I needed to stay and see if the fire would go out to make sure I'd completed the task fully. But that wasn't the real reason, or at least not the strongest one. I wanted to see if anything would happen. Initially, the fire spread slowly, but after a few minutes, the doll's wooden body glowed red, radiating intense heat. The smoke that rose was green and seemed thicker than usual, like a stream of liquid flowing upwards to the ceiling. Then there was a crackling sound and a flash of light. The doll disappeared. In its place, Uncle Teddy was kneeling there, naked and bloody, with claw marks on his chest. He looked around the room, his eyes lighting up with relief as he realized where he was. In his left hand was a clump of stiff, black, fur-like hair. Then he looked up, staring at me. "Hello, Cordelia. You should have left by now." I swallowed hard, stepping back. Sorry, Uncle. I'll go right away." He shook his head, standing up, his face serious, his eyes unreadable. "No, it's too late now. We need to talk." So he wasn't really dead. We were sitting in a large, cozy living room, across the hall from the room where I had burned the doll just minutes earlier. After forbidding me to leave, Uncle Teddy had carefully placed the clump of black fur he was holding into a small glass jar and hidden it in a dark corner of a built-in shelf. He had left the room for a moment, returning with a deep red robe for himself, then gestured for me to follow him to this living room. Now we sat, his hands clasped on his lap, looking at me with a faint smile. "No, I did die. What did they tell you was the cause of my death?" I flinched slightly, but tried to follow his train of thought. Of course, I didn't believe he was dead, but clearly something strange was happening, and while I couldn't rule out the possibility of an elaborate hoax, it seemed unlikely. Everyone said you had a stroke." He frowned. "Well, I need to be more careful, at least change my diet." He chuckled softly, then returned to the main point. "You witnessed something extraordinary tonight. You deserve to know the truth." I nodded, fidgeting uneasily in my chair. "It would be good to get an explanation. I'm pretty freaked out right now, and please tell me the truth. You faked your death." Uncle Teddy raised an eyebrow. "No, I really died. They buried that body, and it's still in the grave, decomposing right now." "But how is that possible? If you died, how are you sitting here?" He leaned forward, his eyes sparkling in the dim light from the lamps in the far corners of the room. "Because I went to hell, and you brought me back." I shot up from my chair. "Come on, I don't have time for this nonsense. Pay me the money, and I'll get out of here." He waved his hand, signaling me to sit down. "Calm down, you need to hear me out. Trust me, this is for your own good." I slumped back into the chair, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. Why is it for my good?" Uncle Teddy sighed. "Look, I didn't want to drag you into this. You're Sam's daughter, and I always thought you were a good girl. But you're the only remaining blood relative I have, and this ritual requires the blood of a relative. If you had done exactly as asked and left as planned, there would have been no problem. But you didn't." I frowned, my stomach churning even more. "So what? I can leave now." He shook his head. "You could, but I advise against it. Not yet, at least." Uncle Teddy held up a finger. "Let me explain. Describe to me the people who showed up at my memorial, or let me guess. All well-dressed, rich, but a bit creepy, right? And they acted overly friendly, especially to you." I swallowed before replying. "Yes, they were very strange, especially the two old women, Dee and Millie." His eyes widened slightly. "Damn it, I should have guessed. Stay away from them. Those two are very dangerous." He ran a hand through his hair, his expression growing more strained. "Actually, all of them are dangerous. But here's the thing. My death and return are very important to those people. There are probably half a dozen of them watching this house right now, and a few of them must already know I'm back and you haven't left, which means you might be holding information they don't want revealed." "What kind of information?" Uncle Teddy leaned back in his chair, his face darkening, and began to tell his story. "When I was in my early 20s, I came here to make a living as a painter, but as you might guess, things weren't going well. In less than 6 weeks, I was on the verge of starvation. No one was interested in my paintings or sculptures. I was selling off my tools just to buy a bus ticket home. Then one day, I was sitting in a park, whittling a piece of wood. A well-dressed man approached and sat down next to me. At first, he just watched me carve. I was carving a small face from a piece of wood I'd found in an alley the day before. Back then, I used to scavenge alleys for cans and bottles to exchange for loose change, and sometimes if I found a nice piece of wood, I'd carve something to pass the time. However, this man was watching me with an unusual intensity. I just ignored him and continued carving. A while later, he spoke, complimenting my talent, asking how long I'd been carving, and if I'd ever made toys or dolls. To be honest, I was suspicious, thinking he was hitting on me, but then he murmured that he belonged to a group of people looking for artisans to make dolls with very specific requirements. He said the pay was very generous. I accepted immediately, as I was desperate for money then. I tried to ask professional-sounding questions to appear competent, but it was only much later that I understood it was precisely my desperation that made him approach me. He said he would bring me a book explaining all the requirements for the ghost dolls, along with the materials. He even asked if I knew Latin or French. Seeing my hesitation, he waved his hand and said it didn't matter, just looking at the illustrations would be enough. 2 days later, in my squalid apartment, I was surrounded by piles of wood and ivory, along with a small rotary saw and a dental drill for carving. I sat on the floor, a thick leather-bound book on my lap, gripping its spine with both hands. I couldn't read Latin or French, but the illustrations were indeed very detailed. It was a book on occultism, filled with disgusting practices and rituals. I wasn't entirely sure, but most of it seemed to involve summoning and controlling spirits or demons. I was scared, but I kept turning the pages until I reached the section on poopy memoir asterisk, which in French means memorial dolls. The basic structure of these dolls was quite simple: a wooden body with articulated shoulders and hips, and an ivory head carved with a precise likeness of the person to be embodied. Inside the body was a hollow space to contain hair or flesh from that person. Over the years, I improved the design to make them more beautiful, but the function remained the same. You'd be surprised how competitive those people were. Everyone wanted their doll to be the most magnificent. But the first time I made a memorial doll, I was terrified. I was afraid of both my clients and the consequences if I messed up. I could have walked away then. Looking back, I wish I had. But I was young and foolish, afraid of the shame of returning home empty-handed. The promised reward was $5,000, which was a huge amount 30 years ago, so I set to work. That first time, I was so anxious it took me almost a month. I started and stopped countless times, using up half the materials they sent before realizing I needed to calm down, let go of my thoughts, and just let it flow out. When I returned to the wood and ivory, everything was completely different. I just carved, and the forms poured out so naturally. In just 8 hours, I finished my first doll, more beautiful than anything I had ever made. Holding the completed doll, I felt like I was looking deep into the soul of that mysterious client. I had created something real, something powerful and true, and that's what kept me hooked. I believe everyone has a job or several jobs they are born to do, call it destiny or whatever you want. When you find it, you just know. I did, and now I knew this was my calling. Mr. Darrow, that was the name the man introduced himself with when he came to inspect the doll, was very pleased with my work. He examined it meticulously, turning the doll every which way. He looked at me several times, asking how I knew to carve this line or touch that spot, details that weren't in the illustrations. I just shrugged, no longer afraid, and replied that I knew they had to be that way. He nodded, his eyes welling up as he set the doll down. "It's beautiful, perfect." Then he unexpectedly hugged me, awkwardly muttering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Regaining his composure, he stepped back, wiping his eyes. "You're about to become a very rich young man," he said. He was right. Darrow belonged to a vast network of wealthy and powerful individuals, all eager to have their own dolls. Back then, each doll could fetch $500,000, which later rose to millions. 5 years later, I was well off, no longer worrying about money. But I never considered stopping. I loved the work. Besides, they wouldn't let me stop. You have to understand, these people were all evil. From the first time I saw that book, I knew I was involved with some kind of supernatural magic. At first, I guessed it was some kind of voodoo or black magic, thinking rich people with too much time on their hands wanted to dabble in the dark arts for novelty. But no, they were the real deal. You have to understand, over the years, I saw many things. I attended some of their rituals, witnessed the results of what they did. They were genuinely summoning primal dark forces to increase their wealth, destroy their enemies, and wield power beyond human capability. By the time I understood how deeply I was involved, I couldn't get out. I cleared my throat. Okay, so what were the dolls for in the end? Uncle Teddy nodded. I'm getting to that. He stood up and walked over to the fireplace in the room. The first thing you need to accept is that hell is real. There are other worlds, other realms that exist in parallel, and hell is just one of them. It's different now than it used to be, but its primary function hasn't changed. It's still a terrible prison for wicked souls. He turned back to me with a humorless smile. Unsurprisingly, my business associates fell into that category, and what I feared has just been confirmed this week. I did too, he sighed. No one wants to go there. So the ultimate goal of any dark occultist is to find a loophole, a backdoor, or some way to evade the consequences. There are very few methods, but the dolls are one of them. If done correctly and the ritual is performed properly, that person will swap places with the doll, sending the doll to hell. I shook my head. Let's say I believe these stories, which, by the way, I don't. Wouldn't that just be a postponement? Eventually, you just die again, right? He shrugged. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. When you helped me come back, I was reborn in a new body. Basically, a physical manifestation of my spiritual, soulful self. Sometimes the results can be strange, but usually, people return to a healthy version of their old bodies. Because we always consider illness or the cause of death as something separate from ourselves, that plaque-clogged artery that killed me is probably clean now. Furthermore, if they can return for a few hours, many can even heal themselves, and they can also extend their lifespan significantly. I estimate Mr. Darrow was over 100 when I first met him, and he's still alive and kicking. But most importantly, all of them are waiting for something called the Rift. I don't know the details because they don't talk much, but I overheard bits and pieces. They believe that at that time, the rules of the game will change. Anyway, it's better than sitting in hell. I sympathize with them on that point. He reached up and lightly touched the wound on his chest. I was about to ask more, but suddenly there was a loud banging on the front door in the hall. Uncle Teddy placed a finger to his lips, signaling silence. You stay here. If you hear me say worth every penny, you run out the back door, run and keep running. Don't go home, don't go back to anywhere they can track you. He waved his hand reassuringly when he saw my expression. Hopefully, it won't come to that. They need me, but just in case. I could see his worry, and even though I wasn't sure how much of his story was true, I believed I was in danger. I held my breath as I heard him open the door right as the knocking stopped. A booming voice echoed down the hall. It sounded exactly like the lawyer I'd met this morning. We know she hasn't left, Ted. I'm sorry, but we have to take her. Herschel, I thought you were smart enough to understand that's not going to happen. My niece will stay with me, under my protection. She won't divulge your precious secret, because she's smart enough not to want to die. So, is that clear? I heard the man's exasperated, skeptical snort. No, Ted, it's not clear. You need to remember your place. You're only important because we find you useful. You have no power of your own. Now, step aside. Uncle Teddy's voice dropped, but it was cold as ice as he replied. You know, I could tell you to go to hell. But coming from my mouth, it sounds more like a command than an insult, doesn't it? Because believe me, if you or any other member of the circle tries to treat me like a pet instead of a partner, I will permanently destroy your safety net. And they might find someone to replace me in another 50 or 60 years. That's about how long it took you to scour the globe for someone last time, right? But how long do you think old, stinking farts like you can hold out before your magic wears off? Before something unexpected finishes you off? Like an aneurysm, a car accident, or worse, a large caliber bullet straight to the head from 200 yards away. Because spells only help with things you or your cronies can see and anticipate, right? That's right. He paused for a moment, then continued in a chilling voice. And me? I don't have any fancy magic. I'm just a simple doll maker, as you said. I have to remember my place. So if I'm smart, just a little bit smart, I'll take a few $1 million, the money you've paid me over the years, and use it to sign some contingency contracts with assassins targeting all my associates, just in case someone someday decides to put me down, to turn me from a doll maker into someone's dog. If I'm smart, I'll tell them that if they hear I've died and I don't personally confirm it within a week, They should avenge it, and since they're men and women, I assume they're assassins, not detectives. And since I'm just a doll maker, and I don't know who would want to harm me, I'll tell them to take care of everyone, just to be sure. When Mr. Myers spoke again, his voice was trembling, pleading. We never wanted to harm you, Ted. You're our friend, and we truly need you. But she has to go. This isn't my idea, it's an order from higher up. Uncle Teddy chuckled dryly. The problem is I just updated those contracts 20 minutes ago. It was a bit more expensive, but it's fine, well worth ensuring my family's safety. If anything happens to my niece or her family, the old rules still apply. But you're right about one thing, Herschel. You are my friend. All of you are my friends, so I'll pretend this never happened. You just stopped by tonight, right? Just to say hello. A long silence stretched, then his voice cracked hard as river stone. I asked again, right, Herschel? Yes. His voice sounded like it had just been thoroughly beaten. Good, I'd love to chat more, but I have some things to prepare for the big party on Saturday, so I won't tell you to go to hell. I'll tell you to get out. I heard the door slam shut, and then Uncle Teddy came back into the room with a cold smile on his face. At least that bought us some time. Let's see how long. I shuddered. Bought us time? You mean they'll still try to get me? He raised an eyebrow. Certainly. They're crazy and evil and used to getting what they want. They're too afraid to confront me directly, but if they can't force me into servitude, they'll try to intimidate me into compliance. However, they still want to eliminate you, both to silence you and to show me that I'm ultimately just their dog. But tonight's incident will make them back off. It'll probably take them a day or two to discuss and argue about what to do next. I glanced at the darkened windows, unable to help but feel tense. So what's stopping them from using spells or sending monsters to kill me if they're so powerful? He nodded. Good question. But they can't. Over the years, I've made more than one doll in exchange for various charms and protections. This house is surrounded by more layers of wards than they could break through in a month, let alone a few days. No magic can enter or leave unless I personally invite it in or out. Good, but what do we do next? We don't do anything. As for you, you'll cut me a finger-length section of your hair, then go to sleep in the living room. Under no circumstances are you to leave this house until I tell you it's safe. Clear. I frowned. Okay, but why do you need my hair? I tried to smile. Are you going to make a doll of me? He didn't return the smile. Yes, for many reasons, of course. But most importantly for you, there's a high probability that if you die in the next few weeks, you'll go to hell. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. What are you talking about? Why would I go to hell? I'm not a bad person. Uncle Teddy sighed. You need to stop thinking in such absolute black and white terms of good and bad. There are rules about how people get sent to hell and how they get out. Actually, even without cheating with these dolls, you could get out after a few hundred or a few thousand years, but never mind that. The point is, tonight you performed a dark ritual and violated the laws of hell. You didn't know what you were doing, so that mitigates it somewhat, but you'll still carry that stain for a while. The good news is that a single isolated incident like that fades over time. If you die in a few months, things might be fine, but if you get hit by a bus tomorrow morning, I'd bet you'd go to hell. So you're making a doll of me so that if I get sent down, I have a way back. He smiled faintly. Precisely. In the bathroom cabinet, there are scissors. Just cut the hair from the inside. I don't want you looking like a lunatic. For most of the next day, Uncle Teddy locked himself in his workshop, busily crafting my doll and preparing many other things. He said my doll would be special and needed more time to complete. The other preparations were for the party he was hosting on Saturday. Uncle Teddy explained that he had sent invitations to everyone who had ever ordered a doll from him months ago. The local group he knew was called The Circle, but there were actually similar societies all over the world, and he had worked with quite a few of them over the years. The party was advertised as a gathering to allow members from different societies to socialize, with no official rituals or ceremonies. But the highlight was that he planned to give each guest an updated, improved version of their doll. He said that in the early years after making his first doll, he decided to learn Latin and French, along with several other languages that appeared in the texts he'd stumbled upon. Part of his purpose was curiosity, to understand more about memorial dolls and refine his craft, but the main part was self-preservation. He wanted to know all the escape routes and quietly became one of the world's most knowledgeable experts on these sacrificial effigies to hell. One of the things he discovered was that dolls have an expiration date. They are like a snapshot of the doll owner's state at that time. The longer after the doll was created that the person dies and is damned to hell, the longer the ritual to bring them back takes. Time in hell flows differently and faster, so an old doll could turn a week into a month, a year, or even a decade. He saw this as an advantage because it meant many clients would return to order new dolls, and at the same time, the gift he was about to give at the party would be even more valuable. He expected a large turnout, and when I asked why he was still holding a party after everything, he looked at me as if I'd asked a silly question. They've already RSVP'd. I didn't entirely trust my Uncle Teddy, partly because I didn't know him well, and partly because I increasingly believed what he said might be true. I had to admit he was a talented artisan. When he showed me my doll, I was stunned. It was slightly different from the others. Its head was larger than the ones he had ready in the back room for the party. Still, it was unmistakably me. Touching the doll's face, I shivered. By letting him make a doll of me, was I just putting one more foot in the door to hell? Yet, I still wanted the insurance, and despite my skepticism, I believed Uncle Teddy genuinely wanted to protect me. Why did you give me that children's book with the hell poem when I was a kid? It scared me to death. We were sitting in the large, oak-paneled dining room, eating frozen pizza. He looked quite tired from hours of busy work, but his mood seemed cheerful. And when I asked the question, he genuinely laughed. Well, I'm sorry, Cordelia. I had a lot of dark, lonely times working for them. I isolated myself from my family because I didn't want them to intrude on your lives. Then I realized they didn't want me to have friends here either. Their damned secret. Of course, they never gave direct orders. They didn't want to upset me. But if I made friends or dated or even paid a call girl, that person would suddenly disappear. After a few years of that, I gave up. He looked down at the pizza, his face heavy with past and pain. When he looked up, there was a sad smile on his lips. I was there when you were born, you know? You were so beautiful as a baby. He pushed his plate away and leaned back in his chair. By the time I realized I could never be with my family, never allowed to have my own, I broke down. They watched me closely to prevent suicide, but there were times I wanted to give up. What got me through was thinking about you. Thinking about you growing up, living well, starting a family, that sort of thing. In my daydreams, you were almost my adopted daughter. He sighed, looking a bit embarrassed. I found that poem during my research into the dolls. It was in a journal of a German sorcerer from the late 17th century. During one of my depressed moods, I bought that children's storybook and copied the poem into it. Why? I don't know. Perhaps as a warning or a cry for help. I felt that I knew you, in my own pathetic way, and the poem was the closest I could come to revealing to someone what was happening. He grimaced, his face darkening at the damned trap I had jumped into. I reached out, awkwardly patting his arm. We'll find a way out of this. He looked as if he'd been punched in the gut as he recoiled his hand. I'm sorry, Cordelia, but I told you not we asterisk. I have my own way of dealing with this. His voice became distant, fading. I suddenly realized my vision was distorting and blurring. Had he put something in the food? Did my uncle dare to drug my food? I tried to stand up, but it was like walking on a slippery floor. Every movement was a slow, stumbling lurch. Then I plopped back down into the chair. The third time, I managed to stand precariously, glancing towards him. Uncle Teddy was quietly watching, his eyes sadly sparkling. It was that sadness that made me even more afraid. I had to get out of here immediately, before the ceiling lights bore down harshly, like half a dozen angry mini-suns, each trying to pierce my eyelids and my throbbing brain. Grimacing, I tried to open my eyes, scanning my surroundings. I was lying in a large room made of cinder blocks. It looked like a workshop, as I saw all sorts of tools and saws hanging on the walls. As I became more alert, I realized with horror that I was tightly bound to a table or bench. I could only move my head, so I started screaming, but a voice to my right quickly cut off my cries. Be quiet, Cordelia, Dee's raspy voice like snakeskin shedding. Don't scream anymore. She walked into my view, looking no different than she had at the memorial, except now she was in casual clothes under a black rubber apron. The other one wants to keep you alive, of course. We'll have to saw off your limbs, but we'll keep you barely breathing in case we need to revive your old uncle again. Apparently, if you stop breathing, the blood loses its efficacy. Dee bared her crooked, yellowed teeth, like rusted gravestones peeking out from behind her lips. But I've studied many ancient texts. I don't think we need to keep you breathing. I think we just need to drain your blood and store it safely. That way, we don't have to worry about you eating or excreting until the rift happens. She shook her head, her voice full of feigned pity. But that Millie woman is so stubborn. I almost gave up trying to convince her to slit your throat like a pig and drain all your blood. But if you keep making a fuss, who knows? She might change her mind. It's up to you, scream all you want. Go ahead and ask him, Millie suggested. Dee's upper lip curled like a snarling dog. No, why would you think he knows more than I do? Millie, who must have been sitting in the corner of the room, now stood up and approached Dee. No, of course not. He's nothing compared to us. Compared to you, Millie. She reached out and lightly stroked Millie's arm. But you have to admit, he has a talent. Since we brought him in, all 14 resurrections have been successful. You know how rare that is, and you also know that innate talent usually comes with a bit of intuition. Dee snorted. I don't consider all 14 of those cases 100% perfect. A strange voice from behind me spoke, hoarse as if someone was choking on water. They weren't completely successful. I heard a rustling sound, then screamed as it lumbered into view. Half of the man's face was still human flesh, but splotchy with hard scales. The other half was a misshapen, lumpy mass of greenish-gray flesh, like mountains on an alien planet. Even worse, the grotesque flesh squirmed with countless tiny red worms burrowing between the dark crevices. He wore a sweatshirt, but his arms looked more like petrified tree branches than human limbs. Yet, each time he flexed, the dry skin cracked in dozens of places, oozing a thick black substance for a moment before healing. I tried to turn my head away, but Dee clamped my head still, gripping it terribly. You're too loud, interrupting us, and now being disrespectful to my brother, she snarled. I guess we'll just have to drain all your blood. Millie stepped forward. Dee, enough. She looked at the creature. Peter, your transformation is due to your own self-inflicted vice, not Teddy's doll. We've told you repeatedly, you indulged too much in certain things, didn't you? That's why you look like this. Peter staggered forward aggressively. Shut up, he turned to Dee. Dee, tell her to shut up before I lose control. Millie casually continued. You should be ashamed of yourself for becoming the monster you created. Whose fault is that? Peter roared, raising his fist to strike Millie, but suddenly froze, rigid. Millie slowly said, Do you dare lay a hand on me? Even at your strongest, you're no match for us. Peter's body flew backward, crashing against a wall out of sight, then thudded to the floor. Dee shrieked, rushing to him. How could you? You know he's sensitive about what happened, about that craving. You deliberately provoked him. Millie looked at Dee with cold indifference. No, I'm just tired of coddling him like a child. He's not dead, but I won't allow him to disrupt our work with his tantrums anymore. Understood? You control him, or next time I'll snap his head off like a melon. She reached for her phone. And I'll call Teddy right now. I'm tired of humoring you too. I was lost in a jumble of chaotic information. Peter, the grotesque creature, the two old women throwing him around like a toy. While I was still trying to figure out what to do, Uncle Teddy's voice came through the speakerphone. Hello, Millicent. How are you, my dear girl? Hearing this, Millie immediately brightened. Oh, stop it, you charmer. I'm fine, just busy dealing with your niece. I don't want to kill her, but Dee says to kill her as long as we store her blood carefully. Uncle Teddy paused for a moment before replying. I'm no expert, just going by intuition, but I think Cordelia is right. Keeping her alive might be a mistake. All previous bloodline rituals were voluntary. If she's alive and resists, the sacrifice might be tainted by her opposing will. But if she dies, the sacrifice is in a neutral state, unhindered by any thought. Dee suddenly reappeared in my view, her hands stained with the black fluid from Peter. I told you so, but you know Millie is stubborn. Uncle Teddy chuckled softly. Well, Millie, he was cut off. Teddy, where did you learn about the concept of a counterproductive sacrifice? He chuckled again. Darrow gave me some books. I don't speak foreign languages, I just guess a little. Did I use the wrong word? Millie still frowned, but listened as Uncle Teddy continued. I wish you wouldn't tease me, Millicent. I know I don't know much, but I still try to learn from everyone. His voice now sounded a little hurt, which pleased Millie. "No, Teddy, you're a precious gift to all of us. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tease you. And you used the exact right word." Dee rolled her eyes. Millie shot her a warning glance, then continued holding the phone. "You also played a big part in this. Thanks again for the tip about Myers. I always felt there was something incredibly off-putting about him." Uncle Teddy replied, "I hated to do it too, we'd been friends for so long. But there was no way to go along with him for my own good and yours." He sighed. "Enough about happy things. Are you coming to the party tomorrow?" Millie smiled, her cheeks flushed. "How could we miss it? Good, is my niece there?" Millie glanced down at me. "Yes, she's here, looking at you with eyes that could kill." Uncle Teddy chuckled softly. "I suppose so. Cordelia, I'm sorry things turned out this way. But that's life sometimes. I wish you had just gone home as planned. You walked into this yourself, so these ladies have to clean up the mess." Just when I thought he was finished, he continued, "But I still keep my word. You were a good girl. Where you're going, remember that poem I wrote. If you get too scared, try reciting it, it might help a little." Then his voice changed direction. "Millie, the catering staff wants to come in to prepare, so I'll end our call now. I'll see you all tomorrow night." As soon as she hung up, Dee wheeled around to Millie. "I don't trust that cunning old man, not one bit." Millie pouted. "Why?" "As far as I can tell, he proved very firm when Myers showed up at the door, and Teddy didn't hand over the girl immediately. Rumor has it he even threatened us all. I was worried too, but then he called and told us about Myers' whole scheme, that he planned to come back the next day to capture the girl and seize power. At first, I didn't believe it, but Teddy promised to hand her over, and now she's lying there like a roasted chicken, ready to be served." Millie gestured towards me with her chin. Dee frowned, pointing a finger at Millie. "What a coincidence. Myers was involved, but he wouldn't dare betray us alone. That makes no sense." Millie shrugged. "Then go ask him." But Dee scowled. "Besides, he committed suicide the next day. The doll was shattered beside his body. We don't commit suicide if we have a doll for emergencies. Doesn't that contradict the very reason we follow Teddy? It's illogical." Millie glared at the other woman. "He was a heavy smoker who died of an overdose, that's all. I don't understand why he did it. Maybe he was mentally ill. I don't care. I just want our doll maker to be comfortable so he can continue working for a long time. So things are going smoothly. We have the girl. We're about to kill her as you wanted. Now shut up and get to work." Dee grumbled but nodded. "Okay, I hope you're right. Also, Peter broke his spine. It'll probably take a month to recover." Millie gently squeezed Dee's hand. "I'm sorry, but he needs to learn not to interfere. Finish draining the girl's blood, then rest. We have a big day tomorrow, you know." Dee didn't even bother to look at me, her eyes still fixed on the IV tubes draining blood from my body. Hell is even worse than it used to be. At first, they roughly pricked my skin, causing excruciating pain. Now I just felt dizzy, as if floating. This was already the third bag. I thought, I must be dying soon. Millie left once the initial steps were complete. A few men also carried the grotesque Peter out. Only Dee and I remained. She lectured me, waiting for me to slowly die. When hell was first formed, the first fallen souls, including Lucifer, established its kingdom. But then a new entity appeared. This new thing didn't care for rule or order. It only wanted to hunt and kill. The demons began to fear it more than Lucifer himself. They called it the Hunter. No one knew its origin. There were rumors it was banished from another realm, a being called a Baron, but those were just whispers. Lucifer only knew it killed the most powerful demons, and those it killed never revived. In hell, you can be tortured and killed, then revived to endure it again. But if the Hunter catches you, that's it. Where they go, no one knows, perhaps somewhere even worse than hell itself. Its methods are simple, but it's not foolish. It cannot be tricked. Lucifer himself verified this. He tracked the Hunter easily because it didn't hide, and wherever it passed turned into a terrifying black forest. But Lucifer was confident because he was still in his kingdom, with legions and traps. Then he began to sing. I must have still looked confused because Dee glanced at me with a cold smile. I know what you're thinking, but music has incredible power, and Lucifer was extremely skilled. He intended to use his song to trap the Hunter, then unleash all the power of hell to destroy it. Unfortunately, he was used to fighting angels and tormenting souls, and understood nothing about the true nature of the Hunter, because no one does. And that's why he died. The hunter simply passed through the song like a breeze. It tore through Lucifer's legions to the point that the remaining demons scattered in fear. Then only Lucifer remained, the shining angel, standing on a pile of skulls and rotten flesh, ready to fight. Dee's eyes briefly gleamed with a crazed enchantment, but it was useless. The hunter was faster, stronger. Lucifer's magic was almost useless. As soon as it touched Lucifer's flesh, he began to decay. Time in hell is strange, but it's rumored the battle ended swiftly. Finally, Lucifer's fire went out. Noticing I was starting to fade, Dee sharply slapped my face. "Wake up, don't be so disrespectful. I'm telling you where you're going. You should at least show some gratitude." She laughed dryly. I tried to force my eyes open, but everything blurred. And then I was standing in a deep, black forest. The crackling sound of ice on branches somewhere to my left startled me. All around were the shadows of trees, a hazy mist. Then everything sank into boundless darkness. I was completely naked, but my body was intact. The air was bitingly cold. As I moved to stand up, my feet throbbed from stepping on sharp stones. Shivering, I looked up through the canopy for stars, but saw only a black void. I listened, hearing only the wind cutting through the leaves, rustling them. That sound sent shivers down my spine and filled me with despair. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I even thought about just sitting still, because at least nothing had attacked me yet. But then it appeared. A high, clear whistling sound, drawing closer from the infinite darkness. That sound was more terrifying than the cold forest or the dreadful thoughts, because deep in my soul, I knew it was the siren call of endless torment. So I turned and ran, and the thing behind me kept pursuing. The faster I tried to run, the closer the whistling sound became, more urgent. My feet were already slick with blood from stepping on sharp rocks among the trees, and my arms and face were covered in dozens of scratches, as if the branches were reaching out for me, which they probably were. But I didn't know how to avoid them. I only saw trees and mist and shadows and darkness. I didn't feel tired, but I knew I was still being driven into defeat. Then I caught a glimpse of a faint light in the distance. I didn't know whether to be happy or worried. Finding safety or help in hell seemed illogical, but at least it was something new, and I could hardly imagine things getting worse. I veered right, towards the flickering light, realizing the pale blue flames cast weak rays through the gaps in the trees. The whistling was closer now, but I forced myself to slow down to see what creatures were gathered around the fire. Hiding behind a large tree at the edge of the light, I peered at the group of beings huddled around the fire. Honestly, I had no standard for judging, but they looked very much like demons. Each one was grotesquely distorted, some with jagged claws, others covered in gashes, their jagged teeth wide open on their flesh, making smacking sounds as if ravenously hungry. In the firelight, they were clearly dangerous, but they also exuded something like suffering and despair. It felt strange to attribute human emotions to demons, but the smell of fear and sorrow emanated from them, like a strong stench whenever the wind gusted or ice cracked somewhere. A few of them twitched and looked around nervously. A thought flashed through my mind. Surprisingly, they weren't alarmed by the whistling sound. But then I realized the whistling had stopped, and its disappearance didn't reassure me at all. Whatever had made that sound was still here somewhere. I could feel it. I almost stepped out to warn the monsters and hoped for safety in numbers, but then I saw what they were roasting over the fire. It was 2 small children. I drew a sharp breath, deciding to sneak away immediately. But just then, I saw someone at the edge of the light on the other side of the fire. It was me, or at least something with a face identical to mine. Its eyes shone in the blue flames. I grew more terrified by the moment because it wasn't looking at the monsters or the roasted children. It was looking at me. I was about to bolt, but that Cordelia figure smiled and raised a finger to its lips, signaling *SHHH*. It shook its head, then lunged at the monsters with the speed of a gust of wind, tearing through the group, even though they were large and looked terrifying. It didn't kill them immediately, but systematically maimed them, tearing them into limbless torsos, forcing them to crawl or stumble into the dark forest like wounded deer. The Mirror Cordelia figure just let them scatter, occasionally licking its blood-stained fingers with an indifferent air, as if waiting for something. Time passed. Suddenly, it vanished into a blurry shadow. A few moments later, I heard a blood-curdling scream echoing from somewhere far away. Then a second scream, a third, and so on, until all the monsters at the fire pit were caught. I found it hard to estimate time in this place, but at the second scream, I had already started running. It seemed I hadn't gone far before the last scream rang out, and not long after, the whistling sound echoed again, closer and more urgent. I looked around in all directions. There were no other signs, no bonfire, just the abyssal darkness. Damn it, the poem. What was the poem again? I wasn't sure if Uncle Teddy's advice was trustworthy, but I had no other option. My voice echoed hollowly in the darkness, alien even to myself. Hell is a deep and dark forest? No, that's wrong. The whistling was right behind my neck. Hell is a deep and dark forest, the ground there is cold, trees stand bare. What was it? Amidst the shifting shadows, the hunter. I hadn't finished the sentence when I was suddenly thrown forward from behind, crashing hard against a tree trunk, then sliding down with a moan, my back burning where I'd been touched. Looking up, I saw the hunter, still bearing my face, approaching with a sinister smile. Please send someone else to take my place. Everything blurred. I felt myself floating for a moment before thudding onto uneven, sharp stones in searing pain. I raised my head, thinking I saw the hunter still pursuing, but it was gone. Or rather, I had moved from my previous spot. It was still the forest of hell, but a different part. To my left, there was a rumbling sound like a waterfall, and mixed with it, the mournful melody of a violin. Somewhere, Uncle Teddy had bought me a little more time. At least, that's what I hoped. Perhaps the hunter needed time to track me again. A movement flashed, and it reappeared right in front of me. Now it wasn't smiling. Its face held an expression of anger, made even more terrifying because it was using my asterisk face. I let out a strangled cry, clumsily scuttling backward. I was ready to give up. There was no escape from this creature. I continued to scuttle like an awkward crab, my hands bleeding from scraping on stones, my mind numb. The hunter advanced, its arm reaching out, almost touching me, then it vanished. Completely vanished. I sobbed with relief. This time, I stumbled to my feet on shaky legs, but just as I caught my breath, I screamed. Lying precisely where the hunter had stood was a burning doll. My very own doll. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I stood on a low table in the corner of the room, looking out over the gathered crowd. These were the people considered the most powerful dark sorcerers in the world. Most of them were old and ugly, ironically enough, for all their dark magic that could damn themselves to hell for eternity. Or worse, if the legends of the hunter were true, they hadn't gained any bonus youthful beauty. Well, a few might have looked attractive in everyday life, but in this anti-magic zone, they all revealed their aged, corpulent forms, no different from elderly residents of a Gothic nursing home. I even saw more than one flowing black velvet gown and several Victorian-style chokers wrapped around necks like turkey wattle. The reason, of course, was that they couldn't use illusion magic here. No glamour, none of their familiar powers to deceive the masses. All that remained were people who looked like a goth fan had thrown up in a retirement home. But I had to assert that they were still extremely dangerous. Intelligent, cruel individuals, ready to kill me if I made a single mistake. And a mistake would condemn both me and Cordelia to hell for much longer. So throughout the evening, I had smiled, chatted enthusiastically, joked, and acted friendly. I knew some were still suspicious, but most were appeased when they saw me genuinely hand over Cordelia. They were too arrogant, too used to being obeyed, so the idea of the doll maker betraying them was as unthinkable as a dog reading a newspaper. But that's the problem. Just because you don't see it or don't believe it's possible doesn't mean it isn't. We never know what a dog will do when no one is watching. I invited you all here tonight to celebrate our many years of partnership. A few sparse claps. I continued, as you know, I have painstakingly crafted new dolls for all of us tonight, as a gift to repay the kindness you have shown me. This time, the cheers were louder, lasting longer before dying down. You have given me terror, loneliness, guilt, and a stain on my soul that I may never wash clean. However, I hope tonight will be the beginning of a journey to redeem it all. The group below me had started murmuring, exchanging confused glances. I continued just before they could interrupt. There are a few special things about this house, this room, where I was summoned from hell just a few days ago. There's an identical version downstairs and upstairs. And like here, each room has only 2 doors, both reinforced with a titanium core, just like here. Those doors were locked 10 minutes ago. A commotion started in the audience, shouts of outrage erupted, the kind of privileged anger rich people display when they catch the faint scent of danger. Downstairs, I have already arranged the wood for our swap ritual into the correct pattern, thoroughly soaked with gasoline. In just 5 minutes, they will be ignited as scheduled. And upstairs, that's where all your new dolls are stored. I worked hard, meticulously crafting every detail. You know, it was difficult. I had to make them perfect enough to bind your souls, but with just a tiny flaw so that when the ritual starts, it will. I smiled wryly, not bring you back. Most of them were silent now, listening, calculating, and I needed to finish quickly too. As some of you here know, the ritual to call a soul from hell with a doll can only be done once. If the doll is damaged or the ritual is flawed, well, you'll experience never being able to return again. So when those new dolls catch fire, you're finished. No way back. Now you're probably thinking, rush him, kill him, or call for rescue, break down the doors before the fire spreads. That sounds logical, but this. I raised the gun I pulled from my back waistband. The gun is easy to understand. If anyone moves, I'll blow their head off. I can't take all of you down, but surely none of you want to be the first one shot, right? I smiled at the crowd, feeling their fear and hatred radiating like heat. And this box is more complicated. Inside is a small ritual and only one unique doll. It's very special for a very special individual. Actually, two special individuals. You must have heard of them. They call him the Hunter. A few in the room scoffed, thinking it was a joke, but I saw a couple of people look horrified, perhaps understanding what I intended to do. I lit a match and swept the flame into the box containing Cordelia's doll, holding the gun to my temple with my other hand. I don't want to be here when the Hunter appears, so I'll go first. See you all in hell. Then I pulled the trigger. I tried to put out the fire on the doll, though I didn't know why, but there was nothing around to use. Hearing the rushing water from the waterfall, I thought it would be hard to get enough water back in time to extinguish it, and the fire on the doll was burning too fiercely. If I picked it up, it would burn me. With no other option, I moved towards the waterfall, planning to scoop up water if I could. I had only taken a few steps when I saw Uncle Teddy running towards me naked. Cordelia, long time no see, you still look good, don't you? He offered a strained smile that quickly faded. Look, I know this is all terrible for you, and I'm so glad you're still alive. I'm sorry I dragged you into this, but it's almost over. It would be strange to hug you, we're both naked, and I'm not that asterisk kind of uncle. For now, just wait over there with me. I didn't know whether to hate him or be relieved, but in the end, the comfort of seeing a familiar face overwhelmed everything. I silently nodded and followed him. A few steps, hidden behind a large tree, he smiled again, this time more genuinely, then gave an unreadable wink. Time is strange here, but I don't think it will be long. Maybe a few minutes passed, or so I thought. Groups of naked people suddenly appeared out of thin air. At first, one or two, then larger waves, then a few scattered individuals. Most of them were old. I recognized quite a few faces I'd seen at Uncle Teddy's memorial. And even better, Millie and Dee appeared too. I looked at Uncle Teddy suspiciously. He nodded, whispering, "The Hunter deals with them very quickly. In our world, if it kills someone, that person goes to hell. But if they're already in hell and it kills them again, no one knows where they go. Anyway, the Hunter will be back here soon. Don't run when you see it. It will be busy with those fools long enough for us to have time." Indeed, as if summoned by his words, the Hunter suddenly appeared among the newly damned. Now it constantly shifted its face, cycling through the faces of nearly 30 victims it had just killed, all bearing the same gleeful smile. The people tried to flee, but I saw it grab Dee, tearing her in half like a piece of paper. Her body disintegrated into gray ash and vanished. Millie screamed. The Hunter turned its attention to her. Uncle Teddy suddenly vanished from beside me. Before I could even feel fear, my vision blurred, and I found myself falling off a table in my uncle's ritual room. I landed in a pile of congealed bones and human flesh on the floor. Disgusted and panicked, I tried to stand up but slipped several times. Finally, I grabbed the edge of the table for support. Before I could catch my breath, I saw Uncle Teddy's body on the table, his head blown open. The room door burst open, and Teddy walked in, his new, pristine naked body horrifyingly intact. He looked around the room, then turned to me. "Hello, my sunshine, you need a bath. I guess I owe you some explanations." Now, bathed and clean, I sat in the spacious living room, wrapped in a thick cotton robe. Uncle Teddy sat opposite me, his face serious, his voice sincere. The fact that he wasn't joking helped ease my tension, but I was still overwhelmed by anger and fear, and that was an understatement. "You have a lot of explaining to do." He nodded. "Okay, I'll start from the beginning. For almost 10 years, I've been researching and preparing a plan to eliminate them once and for all. Not just kill them, because who knows, some might find a way to escape hell. The only solution was for the hunter to catch them and throw them to somewhere worse than hell. When I was almost ready, I committed suicide. Seeing I was about to ask, he shook his head. Yes, the stroke was faked. I staged it so no one would know what I was planning. I needed to go to hell to get the last ingredient, a clump of the hunter's fur. I interrupted. How did you get its fur without dying? He shrugged. I didn't take it directly from it. I bought it from a demon I had been in contact with. It thought I could get it out of hell. Demons hate being there now, which is understandable. I shivered. I saw for myself. Those demons by the fire were truly horrifying. He frowned. I'm sorry for what you had to go through. I intended for you to stop right after burning the doll, but since you stayed, I had no choice but to involve you in the plan. That demon tricked me into thinking I'd cheated it, then it attacked me, almost killing me. Luckily, you completed the ritual in time and pulled me back. Right, thanks for that. By throwing me to those two old women, I shivered. She lectured me about the hunter the whole time. He sighed. I know, I'm sorry. But it was necessary for them to trust me and to gather them all together. The only way to restore their trust was to blame Myers and offer you up. Besides, I knew I could pull you back from hell. I stared at him, taking a deep breath before speaking. So what did you do to them in the end? He chuckled. Now comes the good part. You know those nesting dolls? I made your doll just like that. The large outer doll had a smaller doll inside its head, and that smaller doll contained an even tinier one. The outer layer had the hunter's fur attached. The second layer did too. The tiny doll in the middle had your hair, plus my blood. I didn't have any other blood besides mine and yours to put on the hunter's doll, so I used your blood. I guessed, or rather, my innate intuition that the hunter often imitates its prey, so I hoped your blood would be close enough to draw it in. I frowned, but how did you know for sure it would pursue and mimic me? He clicked his tongue. I don't know much about it, but more than most. From what I've learned, it resents those who escape hell thanks to the dolls. You helped me escape a second time. How could it not pursue you for punishment? I snarled. So you just assumed I'd be in hell with that monster, risking being torn apart and banished to who knows where? Did you even consider that? His face darkened. Of course I did, and I hated having to do it. But destroying them permanently, preventing them from rekindling and breaking the universe was bigger than your life or mine. This wasn't just revenge. They truly wanted to break the order of the world. Tonight I eradicated the most powerful group among them. If it meant you or I perished in return, then so be it. He forced a smile. But we're still here, so let's celebrate that first. Now may I finish? I grudgingly nodded. I understood, but I still felt resentful. The coldness of that dark forest still lingered on my skin. I had to try hard to focus on his story. Okay, so I lured them to the house, locked them in the room with me, telling them the wood was downstairs and the dolls were upstairs. In truth, both were upstairs. I also planted explosives downstairs in case the hunter didn't appear in time, so the house would burn from the bottom up, forcing their minions to focus on putting out the fire instead of breaking into the upstairs. But in the end, the hunter appeared and dealt with them efficiently. And the device to ignite the second floor caught fire too quickly. By the time we returned, everything was done. So how did the dolls work? He shrugged. My doll was the old type. I took a little of your blood before handing you over, so when it burned, I was pulled back. Their dolls were flawed, no blood, plus a few intentional errors, so they couldn't resurrect through their dolls anymore. Your doll, however, had multiple layers, as I explained. I designed it to burn through. It had to burn through all the layers for you to be pulled back. The outer layer burned, drawing the hunter to our world, and the doll went to hell. The middle layer burned, calling it back to hell and bringing the doll back here. The core layer burned, sending it back to hell again and pulling you back to the mortal realm. He looked satisfied. Understand. I pursed my lips. Yeah, damn it, so many risks, so is it all over now? Really over? His smile became sharp. I'm not done. There are still many more out there who need to be dealt with. I have enough resources to do it, and I want to atone, perhaps avoid being sent back to that forest. But for you, it's over. I'll write you a check for $10 million. After you deposit the money in the bank, you don't need to be involved with me anymore. I froze, unsure how to react. Uncle Teddy smiled, his eyes warm again. Of course, you could also stay and lend this Uncle Teddy a hand.